In the last 24 hours, I've had two games. I played the London system twice, and in both games, I won by move 15. So it's kind of fascinating. I'm just gonna go through these games real quickly. But what I've noticed with these London systems is it's like this. I don't know how you pronounce it, but this Wu Wei, like this effortless action or inaction, and you can kind of let the players do all the heavy lifting for you. That's what happened in these two games. I'm not sure how you know at what level that works until, but the first player was an 1800 player, and it worked. So I imagine occasionally against players that rating it'll still work. So um, let me go into the game here. The first game was against, like I said, an 1800 player on chess.com. It was a 15-10 game, and I just went into a London system with the bishop to f4 move order on move 2, and I thought we were going to get this like Slav like position, and then the guy plays e6, so it's kind of like setting up the semi-Slav formation, which I'm not sure is the best against this, but I'll look into that. So I decided to play c3, and as soon as he plays this bishop to e7, then we want to make a hole for our bishop. So I'm just kind of winging it here and just playing kind of general London moves that are just on principle. And he jumps into this hole, so I can test it. And then I was expecting, I was kind of mentally preparing. I thought he was going to play f5 and play it like a stonewall setup and kind of justify his slow play up until this point, and kind of lock the center up, and then it doesn't matter too much if you're a bit behind in development. But what he ended up doing is he ended up playing c5, and I kind of I'm like, oh, it seems like I just win a pawn here. So what did I spend? I spent 30 seconds, but I just did a quick double check because I'm like, well, it seems like I just take the knight here, win a pawn, and I should just be winning basically. And sure enough, I am. So I took this, and then he plays this move here. So one thing I just mentally note, I'm trying to do a better job of mentally noting how the moves kind of change the position, and like new geometries or new things that are opened or closed or obstructed or what have you. But the key thing to notice here is that this diagonal is now open. So I just drop it back. I think it's kind of its best square. And I was expecting him to castle here, or maybe do this, but he plays this move, and of course this diagonal is still open on his king. So I spent a couple minutes because I just wanted to make sure I didn't botch this or something, but I'm not sure. I mean, I think he was just maybe lashing out after he lost that pawn, just kind of rattled from how strong or solid these restraint structures are. But I mean, I can just take this, and in the game, he ends up doing this c takes d4, and then it's just simple mate in 2 here. So mate in 14 moves against an 1800 player with the London system. So that's kind of interesting. I was expecting, instead of this move here, which just lets me mate him, I was expecting he would probably play here, at least, cover that square. And then what I had planned on doing, my idea was I was going to play bishop to a4. And then the idea is like, this pawn's going to become a problem. So either he has to move his king, and then he can't castle anymore, or else I'm going to be able to pounce on this e6 square. So it's kind of like, like a Wu Wei, where I didn't have to do anything in this position. I just let him do all the heavy lifting for me, and I just kind of put my pieces on typical London system squares, and then just kind of sat back and noticed how his moves changed the position on the board and the effects of those moves. And then this morning I had another game out of the kind of transposed out of the London system, I guess technically, but started out with kind of like a London system. He played a weird, kind of a weird thing, but had this game. This player was rated 1612 on chess.com, and I thought he was probably either going to be playing e6 or g6 here. So I played this bishop to f4 so that I can play knight to c3 if he plays g6. And he plays the c6, and it's kind of like, I'm thinking, well, maybe he's going to like transpose into like a Slav-like structure. And I ended up playing e3. I think possibly maybe a better move order. I mean, it's fine and everything, but I think maybe a better move order is just c3. If he hits me with the quick queen to b6, I can just play queen to b3 myself if I want to. Note that his d pawn isn't developed, so there's not going to be any of these weird issues where I can't go back to c2 because he would play bishop to f5. So I'm going to take a deeper look at this game and just figure out what my optimal way of playing was. But the game ended up going down this route where he now he fianchettos on the king side after he's played c6. And my thought here was as well, in this Bartholomew course on the London, one of their ideas is it's kind of good not having that knight developed on f3, because now you see we have all these pieces lined up on h5 and we can just kind of push the h pawn. So that's what I do. And he plays h5, and I haven't studied these much. I'm going to look at that a bit, but my thought was as well, I'm going to try to get like control of this e5 square and just kind of sit on him and see what he does, and just try to slowly put my pieces in better, slowly improve like the position of my pieces. And as I was thinking, like, I've had this kind of stuff come up before, like in blitz and stuff in the past. And if you play knight to f3, they'll just 90% of people at my level will just rattle off this bishop to g4. And I was kind of looking at it and I thought, well, maybe that's actually not so bad, because I'll play knight f3, they'll play bishop g4, and I'll just play knight e5. Let them exchange this thing off, thinking they have a great position, and then I'll just get my knights set up on these kind of advanced outposts. And maybe in hindsight, maybe that was a little bit too easy on my opponent, but we ended up getting this position that I figured it would go down. And so now I was kind of obsessed with getting my knight on how I was going to proceed and see if I could get some kind of kingside attack, or at least just kind of sit on him for a while. And he plays knight to a6. And I was so just kind of, in my mind, all my play was kind of over here on the king side and in the center, that I didn't even spot that this was like a losing move, because I can just take it. So it's one of those hanging pieces. That's one of the areas I struggle, and I've been drilling tactics for 15 minutes before I play my first game of the day, using Chessimple, the hanging pieces motif. So I'll either do like Lee chess or Chessimple exercises and tactics and try to get better. But anyway, I missed that because I was just kind of, I just played this because that was kind of in my plan of what I was going to do. And so then I ended up playing it because it forces him to castle. And I figured, well, at least I got him committed over there, and I have like a local superiority of pieces. I have more pieces over there than he does. So my thought is I could at some point try to open it up on him, and then also kind of tie him down to this f7 square. So he castles. I ended up thinking for a while, sorry, had a hard time coming up with a real rapid kind of crystal clear plan. But my thought was as well, I was trying to think, like, when he made this knight to a6 move, I figured, he wanted to jump in here at some point. So my idea was I wanted to be able to, my thought was at some point play my queen here and get my queen lined up on g6 in combination, with these two knights down here. And I was kind of like fantasizing about sacrifices. Either I take on f7 and I get my queen here, or I just knight takes on g6 and take with the queen, and then find a way to try to divert this knight from that square. And it made him up. And my idea was, as well, at a minimum, at least it kind of ties his queen over here, because he's going to have to bring it over to e8 to defend that square. And then his rook is just kind of sitting there, and all his pieces are just kind of like tripping over each other. So I played c3. He plays c5. I go ahead with my queen to d3 plan. And then, interestingly, he plays this move here. He brings his queen away. So he is threatening this pawn, the b2 pawn, but he does take away a piece from the defense of his king. And so ideas of sacrifices here are starting to look better, because if I can just get rid of that knight, it could get ugly quick, depending on what he does. So I figured I would just castle, and that way if he took here, obviously that's just bad. I just play here and get a pig and a poke down here. So what's interesting is I just castled, and he just made a losing move. So one thing to notice is that when he moved his queen to c6, he put the queen and the rook here in forking distance. So now, like, he either has to, defend it with his rook or keep the defense with his knight, but he can't, so now he's just kind of tied down even more. And I castle. He played knight to e8, and I guess maybe 5 seconds or something, I'm like, wow, I didn't expect that. And the other obvious thing, the effect of that move, is that his knight, or his knight traps in his rook. It doesn't have any. It's like a trap piece with no movement. It's just in a tomb. So I just played this, and he just resigned on the spot. So, but I mean, it would have been a pretty easy game. But I mean, I would have expected he'd play on a little bit. I'm just technically just getting the exchange, right? But I do have some pressure in the position. So anyway, kind of happy with the success I'm having with these London systems and the restraint structures. It's just kind of interesting how much work your opponents will tend to do for you, and you can just kind of sit back and not be like passive, but just try to pay attention to the changes that are going on in the position, and not necessarily feeling like you have to force something. Just let the game come to you. And I think up to a pretty high level, I'm thinking it's gonna there's gonna be something to that, this Wu Wei, where you just have this effortless action, or just kind of inexertion, and you just, like, these two games, both my players did all the work. I didn't do anything special, and like the winning moves were very easy to spot. So anyway, hope you found that interesting. Have a good one.